Greetings, gamers. Welcome to part number 44 of my Let's Play Fire Emblem 10, Radiant Dawn. And in today's episode, I have given DevDan a beautiful amount of experience points, as well as the energy drop I possessed, and he is level 20. So Master Crowns and Master Seals cannot be sold in this game. I despise this, literally despise this, because in every other entry in the series you can sell the seals in order that you would use to promote your units. I despise this. I cannot say this enough times. I despise this. You cannot sell the Satori signs either. I hate that. If you could, I probably wouldn't use these at all in Radiant Dawn. And the reason being is because you can just promote. All I'd have to do is give him a bit more experience points and he would promote. But because of this, I will use these to early promote, obviously. Which I almost never do in Radiant Dawn. I do it in Path of Radiance more than I do in Radiant Dawn, but when I do it in Radiant Dawn, it's pretty seldom. So I typically use it to cap off a unit and just give him his final level instead of wasting bonus experience points or battle experience points on such. So he's going to be receiving his class change to a brand new unit. 3rd tier, in fact. I'm excited. Danved turns from a halberdier to a sentinel and gets some pretty significantly awesome buffs as well. I do believe he's actually kind of close to his cap on speed. I think sentinels only have between 30 and 32 max speed, depending on which sentinel you're using, which isn't great. I'm going to be honest with you here. It's not great at all. But it's okay. I'm going to give him a Brave Lance, but I'm also going to do another Forge. This is going to be a Max Forge for good old Danved. And of course I'm going to use a coin. I only have 2 in stock, which is kind of crazy. And picking the middle. Might +2. Hey! That's nice. Incredibly nice, even. And then this will be called the Wishful. Well, you know what? It would be nice is if I spelled it correctly. Wishful. And of course, that's going to go to Danved. One thing that is interesting about this forge is, unlike the forge I'm created for good old Har, this is not going to be endgame worthy, and you'd almost look at it and say, well, but why? There is good reason for that. It has to do with the S-rank axe compared to the S-rank lance, and also that Danved is going to be using the S-rank lance at some point. He doesn't really need this. The S-rank lance is 1-2 range, whereas the S-rank axe is only 1 range. So having 1-2 range in the late game, as powerful as this, in fact it can only be 1 might better than this if I got the right card. But apparently it's like a 1% chance. Definitely not going to waste my time with re-rolling for something like that. It's just totally impertinent, in my humble opinion. I did make the misstatement last episode that I'm only a couple of chapters away. I'm actually like 3 or 4 chapters away from being ended of this part, so kind of technically true when I was saying that we're a far way off. Thoron is the only interesting item that she has for sale in the bargain. I wouldn't bother with it, honestly. Pure waters are interesting to have later on, but when you do actually need them, you are still capable of buying them, so I wouldn't worry about that. With that being said, however, it is time to save and begin.
It is time to get moving. Do we have a target?
First, we'll head to Flagair, for the fortress town between Crimea and Begnion. Since the Leguse Alliance has fought in Flagair already, we're familiar with the lay of the land.
Sounds like a good plan. Do you still resent your choice to command this army?
No offense, Apostle, but you didn't give me much of a choice in the first place. Besides, if I'm not fully committed, how can I expect these troops to be? Just remember, when this is all over, you'll be getting one heck of a bill.
Oh, I'm sure. And I know you'll be worth it. Speaking of which, I have something for you. Consider it a down payment. I'm sure you remember this blade. It is the Holy Sword Ragnar. Please take it.
Are you sure about this? I returned it after the Mad King's War because you said it was one of Begnion's national treasures.
Indeed. This sword was used by Empress Altina, the first apostle of Begnion, back in the early days of the Empire. It was one of the 2 swords the Empress used to fight the Dark God. I can think of no one better person to give it to.
Alright, I'd be happy to use it again. Thanks. Yes. Ike is now even more complete than he was before. Excuse me, I bring urgent news to Queen Alencia and General Ike of the Apostles' Army.
What happened?
We've received a report that the Dayan army has appeared near the border between Dayan and Crimea. The Dayan army demands custody of the Apostle on behalf of Begnion. They will use force if necessary. Dayan wants to get into our hair again? Perfect.
I am puzzled by this. Why does Dayan support the Senate? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter. Ike, we must change our target.
Agreed. We have to get Dayan out of our way before we can do anything else.
So Dayan still refuses to negotiate? Either way, they believe the Senate's lies. Or the Senate is pulling some strings behind the scenes.
Well, whatever the reason, we can't attack Begnion without taking care of this first.
I will not give up. I won't stop sending messengers until they respond, Ike. I leave you in charge here.
Let's keep our numbers small. We shouldn't provoke them any further. I understand. Gallia will stay behind. You'll have your turn soon, Scrimmer. I promise. All right, let's go. Choose units. Titania, Shinon, Har, Mist. I don't really think I'm going to need Heather, but it is always good to check before I make such a statement. I'm not bothering with the shine barriers. Physic would be nice. There is one physic I could obtain. It's looking like, yes, that's pretty much all I can obtain, and being honest, it is worth it. It is always worth it to have another good old physic. You can go here, you can go here. Where is Rayson? Am I not allowed to bring him here? Oh, wow. He's just literally taken off of my roster. That is impressively stupid, to say the least. Oh, wait, actually, I remember why this is the case. Never mind. So, before I start this map, I did want to talk more about Danved, who is a sentinel. Legendary lancers who stride battlefields with calm and surety. They wield the skill Impale. See, the skill is actually the reason why I wanted to talk about him more, because the fact of the matter is that it's probably the best Bjork skill in the game. I mean, well, not really. I think Luna might be stronger when it comes to damage. I'm just talking about purely damage. Luna is stronger, but Impale is pretty good. Can multiply damage dealt by 4 times, so it's a better crit. And he also gets crit plus 10, which is nice. It's one of the reasons why I decided Gamble was pretty good on him, especially because I have things like the Killer Lance with 30 crit and Wishful with 15 crit. I do have more Killer Lances as well, which is great to keep in mind. Now granted, I do have 2 new units to speak of. Sigrun, a Falcon Knight, level 19 in fact. She is almost ready to be 3rd tier.
And she has some pretty darn good bases, as well as some okay growth rates. 40% HP, 45% strength, 10% magic, 70% skill, 25% abysmal speed. Why? 70% luck, 10% defense, and 40 or 50% resistance. Sigrun is kind of weird. She's a Falcon Knight who doesn't really have a speed growth to speak of. Again, this is just something that Radiant Dawn does. A lot of people think this is strange, but Radiant Dawn does this so that you can cap out other stats first and then use bonus experience points to cap out the rest. She's guaranteed to cap out all her stats if you use bonus experience points to its advantage. Now, she does come with A in swords and S in lances. What I unfortunately hate about the Falcon Knights is none of them can have a double S rank in swords. So, if you want any of them to use the double S rank swords, which there are a few, you're out of luck. She comes with no skills to speak of, unfortunately, besides Canto, which, Canto is really kind of all she needs. Canto is just that good. And then Tanith, a Falcon Knight, with quite a bit better growth rates, but much lower bases. So 35% HP, 55% strength, 15% magic, 75% skill, 40% speed, 35% luck, 40% defense, and 30% resistance. So, kind of reaching a trend here. And that trend is that your units are usually made in certain different kind of niches. So Tanith is all about the strength and the physical damage, much speedier as well. But Sigrun, she is all about this magically resistance and capable of being a bit bulkier than Tanith, which I do appreciate. Granted, her 10% defense growth is going literally nowhere without bonus experience points, so there is that factor. One interesting thing about this chapter, which is probably worth noting, is that this chapter has the same pitfall gimmick it has in Path of Radiance, which I don't like. Reason being is because the game gives you a billion different flying units by this point, so if you wanted to, you could completely kit out your team with people who cannot possibly be pitfalled, which is almost like, why is this even here? See, in Path of Radiance, you could kind of do the same thing, but your units are way stronger at this point with the amount that you get. In fact, you also get Sigrun and Tanith in this chapter. I've got Har. Now, I'm not planning on using either Sigrun or Tanith in a permanent sense, but I could potentially use them for maybe some damage in this chapter, helping out and whatnot, especially because there are no ballista on this chapter. There's just stone hoists. And there's not very many bows or crossbows, but they do exist. You do want to be very careful of this factor. Because of this, I don't typically like using them anyway, beyond a certain point, like the halfway point of this chapter, because then you're surrounded by wind mages, archers, snipers, crossbowmen, and you don't really want to get hit by any of them, right? Right. So it is time to save,
and it is time to begin.
I cannot believe this. It's an army of subhumans of Bjork. It must be true that this apostle is a fake. The true apostle would never join forces with those filthy creatures.
The enemy has sent a messenger once again, Commander. This is the third time they've asked to negotiate.
Ignore the messengers. We must protect this bridge. That is the order from the Maiden of Dawn.
the psychotic Maiden of Dawn. Yeah, so there is a pitfall here, notably. 2 pitfalls right here, notably. And a couple of more pitfalls around, like, the outskirts that I'm going to hopefully avoid. What it means is I have to go through this section here without hitting that pitfall, and then go through, I believe, the middle section here and avoid these 2 pitfalls right here. The problem is with this chapter is that you can also do something very cheeky, which is to have one of your flying units hover
over the pitfall. And then obviously you can walk over it with your other unit and it won't pitfall because it's already occupied. Interestingly enough, there is actually a coin right here. I don't think this is a visitable tent, though it does look like you are capable. Yeah, so there's a coin right here. It's not really all that important. And then the Aquar. This is a 34 might crossbow. This is the second best crossbow in the game. And I can't wait to give that to Jinan. That's going to be nice. He'll have a better weapon to use for 1-2 range. Not having Racing here is kind of a bummer because you really love, you get used to, and you really just love the ability to, oh, nice. You crit the first time, you would have wasted 2 less uses. You really love the ability to be able to dance with your units. In this case, and in this game, chant, of course. It's not that I forget that, it's more or less like, I just neglect to remember. Alright, so... and then I can move you. Keep you all in the behind, just in case I need some backup for any kind of reason. I do believe this chapter has reinforcements to the rear, so I wouldn't leave them in the back anyway, as that's just kind of stupid. Yeah, they're all going to attack Shinon. This is unfortunate. I probably should have equipped him with his crossbow instead. But, oh well. I don't plan on staying behind for them. Nice. I guess the defensive buffs that he's receiving from the support with Titania is pretty good after all. Especially since that's a +3 defense and resistance. And what that means is that the man has insane bulk. Just absolutely insane bulk. Yep, let's keep moving.
Hey, sorry to keep you waiting. I had a little thing back at camp that I had to deal with.
No problem, Tibarn. What kind of thing? Oh, and hey, where's Racing?
He was exhausted, but he insisted on coming with me. I had to tie him down to a bed to keep him there.
Really?
Nah, I'm just kidding. He passed out earlier, so I have a different anchor slowing me down this time.
Leanne?
I will fight. Yes?
She's Racing's sister for sure. The girl's as stubborn as he is. Listen up, young lady. You Hurons are supposed to be more like Raphael, quiet and graceful and all that.
Don't mind Tibarn, Leanne. We're honored to have you here. No, do mind him. I thoroughly agree. Quiet and graceful. Uh-huh. Killer Lance. I might have to just KO you. Perfect. Again, one of those moments where had she gotten a crit, save some uses, right? Okay. Golger. Move again. You have to be very careful with Leanne because she is so darn frail. So darn frail that you're likely to just have your units perish. Well, her perish particularly if you aren't careful. All right. Echoed. I'm running out of uses with missed weapons, I have to be very careful with the floret. The floret cannot, absolutely cannot be used up. It will be quite the conundrum. Well, one thing I do have to kind of do here is I need to KO all of these guys, or Leanne is doomed. Alright, Brave Lance it is for this soldier here. Hand axe. I think you're the only ranged user over here. Most units in this game only have one weapon, and the reason why that is so you can't just go up and steal weapons and items that are unequipped, making the game quote-unquote too easy. And then here I am, I'm an advocate for Thracia, where, like, the complete opposite mindset was made with that game. Complete opposite. Shade, you should be safe right there, hopefully. Yeah, Tanith and Sigron, a lot of people like these units because they're flyers. I don't actually think that's enough to salvage them necessarily, because both of them have some pretty significant issues. Granted, there is something that does make them pretty impressive, though. That's pretty well late game. You're never going to see it anywhere near this point in the game. Reason being is because you need them to be usable while you can use another couple of units. For instance, technically I believe they could already do their triangle attack with Marcia, which is fantastic. And yes, they have a triangle attack, but they have a fourth triangle attacker, which makes it no longer a triangle. But apparently the folks at Fire Emblem can't figure that one out. Either way, it doesn't particularly matter, because it's a fantastic addition for the folks who need or want some good old oh, where was I going with that? Man, I just lost my train of thought. Have you ever had that happen to you where it's just like, bam, you're talking about something, you know what you're talking about, and it just completely disappears? That's kind of unfortunate. I was probably talking out my rear anyway. So Ike no longer needs to use any of his weapons besides the Ragnell. Like, the rest of it is pretty well pointless, which actually means that I can give Mist her Sacred back, which is nice. Attack with the Ragnell. I'm not even KOing there. What is this, Ike? You're supposed to be stronger than this. I mean, leaving him on 1 damage isn't the worst thing in the world, but it could be better. Roth's bow. Yeah, but I far and away prefer Thracia's lesser ideal about the whole balance thing over something like Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. These games get a little bit too frisky with that, especially because, like, if you think about it, and this is actually kind of insane to consider, these games do not at all have a warp staff in them. They do both have rescue staves, but that is your only teleportation magic, and you get one. One. Why is that a thing? You mean to tell me that warp magic is that powerful that the only one that can be justified in this game is one singular rescue staff in either game? Okay, so you know what's crazy, even crazier about this? and I definitely mean even crazier, is that Thracia, all in all, has something like 20 warp staves. I don't think it's that much. It might be around like 15, but it's seriously a lot of warp staves. And why is that? Why is it exactly that that game has so many, but this game doesn't have hardly any at all? Well, I can tell you why that is. It's because this game has a very serious issue with letting you have fun. Very serious issue. Good job, Ike. So some folks will say I'm blowing it way out of proportion because the fact of the matter is you can still have fun with these games without that kind of stuff. And I agree. You can have fun in these games without necessarily having to have a warp staff on all of your units or so on and so forth. I completely understand that. I completely agree. I get that. And sometimes it just sounds like folks are being negative. My problem is not so much that you can't have fun, but so much that the fun is partially taken out of the games when stuff like that is removed, because then you have the situation where, well, I don't have any warp magic. So that's not even something I can use as a strategy. I'm just trying to picture Thracia without warp magic. That game would be such a terrible. Some people will say, "Oh, well, if the game's terrible without it, then it's a bad game." No, the game was designed around you having teleportation magic, both you and the enemies. Therefore, because it was designed around that, it gives this feeling that it is good to use. In one of my upcoming playthroughs with Thracia, I want to do a no Paragon mode, no guidance whatsoever, B-route, bad ending playthrough. And what I mean by bad ending is I'm not recruiting anyone who the Dead Lords would be, which goes for Sarah, Galzus, Dagdar, Avel, and Lithus? Pretty sure that's all 5. Yes, Sarah, Galzus, Dagdar, Avel, Lithus. Yes, that's all 5. I'm not going to recruit any of them. That playthrough is going to be so incredibly difficult, and I'm only going to have 3 warp staves out of the entirety of the game. But I'm only going to be able to use my first warp around chapter 20 or so, because I won't have anybody else who is capable of using it, because there's nothing like arm scrolls in that game. That game is incredibly difficult to figure out strategies without abusing the things that the game gives you, like for instance the warp staves and the guidance chapters and everything that you can access through those methods. And I love that. That's awesome game design. That's what I love about Fire Emblem. When Fire Emblem allows me to play with some crazy things and do some stuff that necessarily modern Fire Emblem doesn't really want you to do. It would be nice if you could get that rescue staff, but you most certainly cannot. Well, without disarm. But you're also entirely unlikely to have anybody who's capable of disarming and not killing these guys, because they're just that weak. I'm doing something very cheeky here. I have Har right here. This is a pitfall spot. There's 2 pitfall spots here. They use a shine barrier. There's no way I can move my units across this part without doing what I'm doing here with Har. And Har was closer to here, so I just decided this was the better spot. There's also 2 pitfall spots right here, so I'm not going to be going over them. Ooh, well, I was going to one-shot, and then I missed. Good job, Titania, making up for lost opportunity. Yeah, I think I'll just let you be. You do have to be very careful with the Stone Hoist and Leanne. She will die to them. And that's just not
something you want at all. Granted, I do have a method of getting her away from that, so it's not that big of a deal. And killer bow. Would be nice if I got a double crit here. Well, one is better than nothing, I will say. Especially because I'll still be able to finish him off with Dev Dan. I know he's Danved, and I know he's Dev Dan in the other game. I mix the name up so often, it's just going to happen. Yeah, what I'm showing with Har here about how he's not really affected by this, these so-called pitfalls, is why I don't really like the fact that they even exist, because it's just like, well, what's the point? What is the point if it doesn't affect you, if you can break it, if you can get away from it, if there's no real I'm gonna go right here. If there's no real advantage or disadvantage of, you know, having it in the map. And yes, gimmicks are good. Map gimmicks have always been a thing in Fire Emblem. I'm pretty sure from the very beginning, actually. Some map gimmicks are more fun than others. Granted, nothing in Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn or anything prior is as bad as some of the gimmicks that happen in some of the 3DS games, where those gimmicks are just like, why is this a thing in Fire Emblem? It's abysmal, in my humble opinion. All right. So Har's going to take out all of these yahoos. And then my turn will be finished. In fact, not just my turn, but several other things will be finished. It's really funny that there is a rescue staff user in this party, because, or this enemy party, because you're just like, well, but why though? What's the honest to goodness point? Yep, and I need to get rid of all those stone hoists, because they are a serious problem for Leanne especially. Heather too, but doesn't really matter, because if I lost Heather, it wouldn't be the end of the world, whereas Leanne is absolutely necessary. Pretty sure I only have a few more things I can steal worth stealing in the rest of this game. So, that being said, you know, Thief Utility with stats like this, you know, she's not bringing any combat to the table, that's for sure. But that is the end of this episode. I want to thank you for joining me. If you like my content, please upvote and follow, or like and subscribe, depending on your platform. And while you're at it, have a great and glorious day gaming.